A 7-year-old girl wakes up with her heart racing on graduation day, fearing she will be the only one without a date. At school, an impulse makes her ask a stranger to pretend to be her father just for that moment, unaware that he is a millionaire. His unexpected gesture initiates a connection capable of changing both their destinies. But for this bond to survive, they will have to face rumors, bureaucracy, and a legal battle full of twists and turns. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. Emma Taylor woke up with her heart racing in her tiny bedroom. Sunlight filtered through the worn curtains, illuminating the carefully ironed dress hanging on the closet door. Today was kindergarten graduation day at Westbrook Elementary in Portland, Oregon, a day most children anticipated with excitement. But for 7-year-old Emma, it brought a knot of dread so tight she could barely breathe. "Emma, honey, are you awake?" Martha's frail voice called from the adjacent room, followed by a bout of coughing. "Coming, Nana," Emma replied quickly, slipping into her everyday clothes before checking on the elderly woman who had raised her. Martha Jenkins lay propped against pillows on a metal-framed bed, her silver hair in a neat braid despite her obvious exhaustion. At 78, she had raised Emma since finding her abandoned as an infant, a secret they'd carefully guarded from authorities who might separate them. "Today's your special day," Martha smiled, her weathered hand squeezing Emma's. "I wish I could be there, sweetheart." "It's okay, Nana," Emma assured her, though disappointment clenched her small chest. For weeks, she'd fabricated elaborate stories for her classmates about her father, a successful businessman always traveling, but who promised to attend her graduation. She'd created this fiction not from a place of dishonesty, but from the desperate need to belong among peers with intact families. After preparing Martha's medication and a simple breakfast, Emma donned her graduation dress, a second-hand find. Martha had painstakingly altered between her increasingly frequent bouts of illness. The white dress with tiny blue flowers was the prettiest thing Emma had ever owned. "You look beautiful," Martha whispered, tears shimmering in her pale blue eyes. "Now remember what we practiced. If anyone asks, 'My dad's meeting me at school,' and you're resting at home because of your arthritis," Emma recited. The familiar lie tasted bitter but necessary. The bus ride to Westbrook Elementary was a blur of anxiety. Upon arrival, Emma's stomach sank. The schoolyard had transformed into a festival of family celebration. Mothers adjusted daughters' hair ribbons, while fathers hoisted toddler siblings onto shoulders. Grandparents distributed proud hugs and expensive gifts. Teachers directed families toward the auditorium, where rows of tiny chairs awaited their graduates. Emma slipped through the crowd, nodding vaguely when asked where her family was. "They're coming soon," became her mantra, each repetition more hollow than the last. Her teacher, Ms. Roberts, approached with a concerned smile. "Emma, honey, we're about to line up. Is your family here yet?" "My dad's parking the car," Emma replied automatically, avoiding Ms. Roberts' sympathetic gaze. The teacher's expression revealed she knew the truth. She'd never met any family member during parent-teacher conferences, only received notes supposedly from Martha explaining her absence. As children assembled with their families for pre-ceremony photos, Emma retreated to a bench near the parking lot, watching luxury SUVs and minivans disgorge more happy families. Her empty chair in the front row of the auditorium seemed to mock her from a distance. "Just 10 more minutes, then I'll go sit down," she whispered to herself, clutching the small purse Martha had given her, another second-hand treasure containing a handkerchief embroidered with her initials. That's when she saw him. A tall man in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit exited a sleek black Audi, checking his watch with an air of quiet authority. Something about his deliberate movements and the distinguished touches of silver at his temples made Emma's heart leap. He looked exactly like the father she'd described to her classmates. Successful, important, handsome. Without fully realizing what she was doing, Emma slid off the bench and approached him as he was about to return to his car after, apparently, dropping something off at the school office. "Excuse me, sir?" Her voice emerged smaller than intended. The man, Richard Maxwell according to the discreet nameplate on his leather portfolio, turned with mild surprise. His eyes, a deep blue-gray, assessed her with polite curiosity. "Yes?" Emma's courage nearly failed, but desperation propelled her forward. She clasped her hands in a gesture of supplication, her words tumbling out in a whispered rush. "Would you please pretend to be my dad? Just for an hour?" Her voice cracked slightly. "It's my kindergarten graduation, and I told everyone my dad would come, but I don't have one, and no one's going to be in my empty chair, and everyone will know I lied." Richard's expression shifted from confusion to something unreadable. For a moment, something in his eyes softened as he looked at the small girl in her carefully pressed dress, but then a shadow passed over his face. The emotional wall he'd constructed over years of isolated professional success reasserted itself. "I'm sorry, I have an important meeting," he murmured, his voice gentle but firm. "I hope your graduation goes well." Emma's face fell, the rejection stamping itself across her features with devastating clarity. She nodded once, dignity somehow intact despite the crushing disappointment, and turned to walk away. Richard watched her retreating figure, something uncomfortable stirring in his chest as he observed her squared shoulders and the brave tilt of her chin. He slid into his car, started the engine, but found himself unable to drive away. Through the windshield, he could see families streaming into the auditorium, the joyful chaos of a celebration about to begin. And in stark contrast, the solitary figure of Emma making her way toward the entrance alone, her white dress bright against the crowd of color. His fingers tightened on the steering wheel as memories he'd long suppressed bubbled to the surface. Of another child, another lost opportunity, another moment when he'd chosen professional obligation over human connection. 5 years ago, he'd been on the verge of adopting a boy named Tyler, a process that had seemed certain until a tragic incident involving the birth family had derailed everything, leaving Richard with a wound he'd never fully acknowledged. The memory of Tyler's face superimposed itself on Emma's expression of disappointed acceptance. Richard found himself reaching for his phone, canceling the meeting that had seemed so critical moments before. An inexplicable urgency gripped him as he watched Emma disappear into the building. Before he fully processed his decision, Richard was out of the car and striding toward a nearby florist shop. 10 minutes later, he re-entered the school grounds, carrying a vibrant bouquet of daisies and sunflowers and a small, elegantly wrapped box of artisan chocolates. The ceremony was just beginning as he slipped into the auditorium, scanning the rows of miniature chairs. He spotted Emma immediately, seated alone in the front row, her posture perfect but her downcast eyes betraying her isolation amid the celebration. Conversations hushed momentarily as Richard, clearly not a regular school parent, made his way confidently to the empty seat beside Emma. He could feel curious gazes following him, assessing his expensive suit and the flowers in his hand. Emma didn't notice him until he was standing directly beside her chair. When she looked up, her eyes widened with disbelief that quickly transformed into a tentative hope so powerful it physically hurt Richard to witness. "I cancelled my meeting," he said simply, extending the flowers. "I wouldn't miss your graduation for anything." The smile that bloomed across Emma's face was like watching the sun emerge from behind storm clouds, radiant, transformative, and somehow both innocent and wise beyond her years. As Richard took his seat beside her, he noticed the whispers around them shifting from curiosity to approval. Emma sat straighter, her entire demeanor changing as she went from the girl without a family to the child with the important father who'd made time for her special day. Neither of them could have anticipated how this moment of kindness, this simple act of pretending, would alter the course of both their lives irrevocably. As pomp and circumstance began playing from the school's speakers, neither Emma nor Richard realized they had just taken the first step on a journey that would challenge everything they thought they knew about family, belonging, and what it means to truly come home. Throughout the ceremony, Emma maintained a delicate balance between joyful disbelief and careful performance. She had rehearsed this moment countless times in her imagination, what it would be like to have a parent watching proudly as she received her kindergarten diploma. Now that it was actually happening, albeit through an improvised arrangement, she found herself playing her part with surprising ease. "That's my daughter," Richard said to the mother seated beside him when Emma's name was called. The words felt strange on his tongue. Not uncomfortable, just unfamiliar. Like trying on a jacket he'd never worn before, but that somehow fit perfectly. When Emma walked across the small stage to receive her certificate, Richard applauded with genuine enthusiasm. The smile she flashed in his direction contained such pure gratitude that it pierced something long dormant within him. For a man who had built his architectural firm on meticulous planning and control, this unexpected emotional connection was both unsettling and oddly freeing. After the ceremony, they posed for photographs together, Richard's hand resting lightly on Emma's shoulder. The school photographer captured their smiles, preserving a moment that, from the outside, appeared to be simply another proud father-daughter celebration. Only they knew the truth of their hasty arrangement. "Thank you," Emma whispered as they moved toward the reception area where refreshments awaited the graduates and their families. "Everyone believes you're really my dad." "You're welcome," Richard replied, surprising himself with how naturally he'd fallen into the role. "You did very well up there." As they navigated the crowd, Richard noticed how other parents interacted with Emma now, offering congratulations, including her in conversations about summer plans, inviting her to birthday parties. All things that seemed commonplace, but that Emma received with barely concealed wonder. He realized with a pang that this social acceptance was as valuable to her as his presence. Mrs. Roberts approached them, extending her hand to Richard. "I'm so pleased to finally meet Emma's father," she said, her expression revealing a mix of surprise and relief. "She's such a bright student. You must be very proud." "Extremely," Richard answered without hesitation, finding that he meant it despite having known Emma for less than 2 hours. There was something remarkable about this child, who had found the courage to approach a stranger with such a vulnerable request. As the reception wound down, Emma turned to Richard with a hesitant expression. Would you mind driving? To me home, it's not far. I usually take the bus, but..." The request was modest, yet Richard understood its significance. He nodded, recognizing that their improvised relationship was approaching its natural conclusion. Soon he would drop her off. They would say goodbye, and this unusual interlude would become just another memory, or so he thought. The drive to Emma's home revealed a neighborhood that stood in stark contrast to the affluent school district. Westbrook Elementary served several communities, including this struggling area, where houses showed signs of neglect and economic hardship. Richard had driven past this neighborhood countless times without really seeing it, despite his firm having designed several revitalization projects nearby. "It's the Blue House," Emma directed, pointing to a small, weathered structure with a sagging porch and patched roof. Despite its obvious state of disrepair, someone had planted cheerful marigolds along the cracked walkway, a brave attempt at beauty amid scarcity. Richard parked, expecting a quick goodbye, but Emma surprised him. "Would you like to meet my Nana?" she asked, her voice caught between hope and embarrassment. "She's been sick, that's why she couldn't come today, but she made cookies yesterday for my graduation." Something about the careful way Emma described her home situation, the protective omissions, the emphasis on what they did have rather than what they lacked, touched Richard deeply. Before he could fully consider the implications, he found himself agreeing. "I'd like that," he said, following Emma up the uneven steps. Inside, the house was immaculately clean, despite its deteriorating condition. Patches of dampness stained. The ceiling and the furniture was mismatched and worn, but everything had been arranged with obvious care. Photos of Emma at various ages decorated the walls. Emma blowing out birthday candles, Emma holding up artwork, Emma reading books. The images portrayed a childhood filled with love, if not material abundance. "Nana?" "I'm home," Emma called, leading Richard to a small bedroom where Martha Jenkins rested against pillows, a crocheted blanket across her lap. Martha's eyes widened at the sight of Richard in his expensive suit, clearly not the usual visitor to their humble home. "Emma, who's this?" she asked, her voice revealing both curiosity and concern. Emma hesitated, then straightened her shoulders. "This is Mr. Richard," He came to my graduation. Martha's gaze sharpened, moving between Emma and Richard with sudden understanding. I see, she said carefully. That was very kind of you, Mr. Maxwell. Richard Maxwell, he supplied, stepping forward to gently shake her fragile hand. Your granddaughter made quite an impression today. As Martha invited him to sit, Richard noticed the carefully organized medication bottles on the nightstand, the makeshift bed of blankets in the corner of the room where Emma presumably slept to stay close to her guardian, and the neatly stacked school books. The signs of their precarious existence were everywhere, as was the evidence of their deep connection. Over simple cookies and tea served in chipped cups, the story emerged. Martha explained how she had found Emma abandoned as an infant, left on the doorstep of the church where Martha had worked as a caretaker. With no identification and a system that Martha feared would separate them, she had taken the baby home, naming her Emma after her own mother. I couldn't bear the thought of her being lost in the system, Martha explained, her voice growing weaker as she spoke. I'd seen too many children shuffled from home to home, so I raised her, myself with help from friends at the church. It wasn't legal, I know that, but it was right. Richard listened, understanding the complex ethical territory this confession represented. As Martha continued, he learned that her health had been declining for months. She suffered from congestive heart failure, and medical bills had depleted their meager savings. The house which she'd inherited from her parents was their only asset, and even that was in jeopardy due to needed repairs they couldn't afford. Throughout the conversation, Emma moved around the small house with the competence of someone much older, refilling Martha's water glass, adjusting her pillows, organizing her medication. Richard observed the careful way she monitored her guardian's energy levels, cutting conversations short when Martha seemed tired. Emma takes care of everything now, Martha said with a mix of pride and worry. She's my little miracle. As evening approached, Richard found himself reluctant to leave. The connection he felt to this improvised family deepened with each revelation. When Martha dozed off, Emma led him to their tiny kitchen where she stood on a stool to wash the teacups. I take care of the house, she explained matter-of-factly. I get water from the neighbor when our pipes freeze, and I know which medicines Nana needs at what times. I can make soup and sandwiches, and I'm learning to sew so I can fix our clothes. The casual recitation of responsibilities no 7-year-old should bear struck Richard powerfully. He thought of his spacious downtown apartment with its untouched gourmet kitchen and rooms he rarely entered. He thought of his successful firm, his investment portfolio, his carefully constructed life of professional achievement and personal emptiness. Emma, he said gently, kneeling to meet her at eye level, does anyone from your school know about your situation? About how sick your Nana is? Emma shook her head vigorously. We can't tell. Nana says they'll take me away. Her small hands twisted in her graduation dress. Are you going to tell? The question hung between them, laden with implications. Richard understood what Martha feared. Without legal guardianship, Emma would indeed be placed in foster care. His architect's mind, trained to see structural weaknesses and potential failure points, recognized the inevitability of this fragile arrangement collapsing. I think I might be able to help, he said carefully, not wanting to make promises he couldn't keep. Would it be all right if I came back tomorrow? Emma's face brightened with hope, though she tried to temper her reaction. You don't have to. You already did what I asked at graduation. I want to, Richard assured her, surprising himself with the certainty he felt. There are some things. We should talk about ways I might be able to help you and your Nana. Later that night, driving back to his sleek downtown apartment, Richard found himself at a crossroads. The practical part of his mind catalogued all the reasons to maintain distance, the legal complications, the disruption to his carefully ordered life, the emotional risk. But another part, long suppressed, recognized this unexpected encounter as something significant. He picked up his phone and called his attorney, Carol Simmons. I need advice on a guardianship situation, he explained, gazing at the city lights reflected in his windshield. It's complicated and it's important. Can you meet tomorrow? As he ended the call, Richard glanced at the program from Emma's graduation that he'd placed on the passenger seat. Her name was printed there among her classmates, an official record of her existence in a world that otherwise had no documentation of Emma Taylor. Emma Maxwell, he said aloud, testing how the name sounded. Something about it felt right, like a design that finally achieves perfect balance after countless revisions. For the first time since the failed adoption years ago, Richard allowed himself to imagine a different kind of future, one that included a child's laughter echoing through his too-quiet home, bedtime stories instead of late nights at the office, and the challenging, beautiful chaos of family. The following morning, Richard arrived at Emma and Martha's house with grocery bags and a determined spirit. He'd spent much of the night researching guardianship laws, speaking with Carol about legal options, and examining his own motivations with brutal honesty. Emma answered the door in faded jeans and a too-large sweater, her expression transforming from cautious to delighted when she saw him. "You really came back." "I said I would," Richard replied, realizing how significant kept promises must be to a child whose life had been defined by uncertainty. He held up the bags. "I brought breakfast." In the small kitchen, Richard unpacked fresh fruit, pastries, and orange juice, while Emma set the table with their mismatched dishes, explaining that Martha was having a harder morning, her tactful way of saying her guardian's health was particularly poor today. While they prepared a tray for Martha, Richard gently asked questions about their daily routine, their support system, and their most pressing concerns. The picture that emerged was both heartbreaking and inspiring, a testament to human resilience and the powerful bond between Emma and the woman who had raised her. "Mr. Wilson next door helps sometimes," Emma explained, as she carefully arranged Martha's pills beside the juice glass. "But he's been talking to people about us lately. Nana says he's stirring up trouble." Richard made a mental note to learn more about this neighbor as they carried the breakfast tray to Martha's room. The elderly woman appeared weaker than the previous day. Her breathing labored, but her eyes brightened at the sight of Richard. "You came back," she echoed Emma's earlier words, her voice revealing both surprise and relief. "We have a lot to talk about," Richard said, helping Emma position the tray across Martha's lap. Over the next hour, as Martha picked at her breakfast, Richard outlined his proposal. He would help secure proper medical care for Martha and assist with the legal process of establishing guardianship of Emma. The plan was ambitious and far from certain, but it offered a path forward that kept them together while addressing their most pressing needs. "Why would you do this for strangers?" Martha asked, her directness cutting through preliminaries. Richard hesitated, then decided on complete honesty. 5 years ago, I was in the process of adopting a boy named Tyler. He was 8, brilliant at math, loved dinosaurs and soccer." His voice grew quiet. "The adoption was nearly finalized when his birth mother's boyfriend challenged the termination of parental rights. There was an incident. The details aren't important now, but it resulted in the adoption being halted. Tyler was placed with relatives in another state. The memory still had the power to hollow him out, even after all this time. I threw myself into work afterward, built my firm into one of the most successful architectural practices in the Pacific Northwest. But something was missing." He looked at Emma, who was listening intently. "When Emma asked me to pretend to be her father yesterday, it felt like a second chance." Martha studied him with eyes that had seen too much of life to be easily convinced. "Good intentions aren't enough for raising a child, Mr. Maxwell." "I know," Richard acknowledged. "That's why I'm not suggesting taking Emma from you. I'm proposing we find a way to make this work together. Legal guardianship for me, while you continue as her grandmother in every way that matters." As they discussed logistics, Emma excused herself to get Martha's medication. Once she was out of earshot, Martha's expression grew grave. "There's something you should know," she whispered, her frail hand gripping Richard's with surprising strength. "The doctors say I have 6 months at best. Emma doesn't know." Tears welled in her eyes. "I've been terrified about what will happen to her, been praying for an answer." Her gaze held his. Are you that answer, Mr. Maxwell? Or will you disappear when things get difficult? The directness of the question struck Richard like a physical blow. He thought of all the times in his life when he had retreated from emotional challenges, when he had chosen the safety of isolation over the risk of connection. I won't disappear, he promised, the words feeling like a vow. I'm not perfect, Martha. I'm a workaholic with trust issues who's lived alone for most of his adult life, but I will not abandon Emma. Something in his tone must have convinced her, because Martha nodded slowly. Then we have work to do, she said, her practical nature asserting itself despite her weakness. Emma has no birth certificate, no social security number. Officially, she doesn't exist. Leave that to me and my attorney, Richard assured her. For now, let's focus on getting you proper medical care. Afternoon, Richard had arranged for a respected home healthcare service to begin visiting Martha daily. His financial resources, deployed with discreet efficiency, secured appointments with specialists and delivery of proper medical equipment. The transformation of their small home began with these essentials, but Richard's vision extended further. While Emma helped Martha rest, Richard surveyed the house's structural issues, the leaking roof, failing plumbing, inadequate heating system. His professional assessment was grim. The repairs needed were extensive and would require temporary relocation. This reality added urgency to their legal situation. Without documentation, securing even temporary housing for Emma would be challenging. I think I should stay here tonight, Richard suggested as evening approached. There's a lot to organize and you both could use the help. Emma's face lit up at the suggestion, though she tried to contain her excitement. You can have the couch. I'll get blankets. That night, after Emma finally fell asleep beside Martha's bed, Richard sat at their small kitchen table, laptop open, making plans. Carol had already begun drafting documents and researching precedents for their unusual case. Without Emma's birth certificate or any official record of her existence, they would need to create a narrative that satisfied the courts while protecting Martha from potential charges of fraud. A soft knock at the front door interrupted his work. Richard opened it to find a middle-aged man with a weathered face and suspicious eyes standing on the porch. Frank Wilson, the man introduced himself curtly. I live next door. Saw your fancy car here all day. Martha doesn't get many visitors, especially not men in $1,000 suits. The territorial hostility was unmistakable, as was the implied accusation. Richard maintained a neutral expression, recognizing this must be the neighbor Emma had mentioned. Richard Maxwell. I'm a friend of the family. Frank's eyebrows rose. Family? Martha hasn't got any family except that girl. He peered past Richard into the house. Speaking of which, where'd she come from anyway? Martha shows up with a baby one day, no explanation, no husband, no nothing. People talk, you know. The insinuation bothered Richard more than he expected. He understood now why Martha worried. About this man, his interest seemed less about concern and more about control through information. I'm sure people do talk, Mr. Wilson, but right now, Martha needs rest, not gossip. Frank's expression hardened. Just looking out for neighbors. Lots of strange things happen to vulnerable old ladies and little girls. City Councilman Thompson is a personal friend of mine. He takes community safety very seriously. The mention of the councilman was clearly meant as a power play. Richard recognized the veiled threat, but refused to engage with it. Your concern is noted. Good night, Mr. Wilson. After closing the door, Richard made another note in his growing list of challenges. Frank Wilson represented another complication, the small-town politics and social dynamics that could either help or hinder their cause. If Wilson had the ear of local officials, his suspicions could create additional obstacles. The next morning, Emma woke to find Richard already dressed and making breakfast. The domesticity of the scene, this sophisticated businessman flipping pancakes in their humble kitchen, made her pause in the doorway, afraid that speaking might break whatever spell had brought him into their lives. Good morning, Richard said, noticing her. I hope you like blueberry pancakes. The simple normalcy of the moment brought tears to Emma's eyes. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. As they ate, Richard outlined the day's plan. Carol would visit to begin documenting Emma's existence through affidavits and retrospective records. A contractor would assess the house for urgent repairs. Most importantly, they would begin the process of establishing Richard as Emma's legal guardian, with Martha's explicit consent. "What does guardian mean exactly?" Emma asked, carefully cutting her pancake into precise squares. Richard considered how to explain the complex legal concept to a 7-year-old. "It means I would be legally responsible for taking care of you, making sure you have what you need, that you're safe, that you get to school, all those things." "Like a dad?" The question was tentative, testing boundaries. "Similar to a dad, yes," Richard answered carefully. "But your relationship with Martha wouldn't change. She'll always be your nana." Emma nodded, processing this information with the seriousness that characterized all her interactions. "Would I live with you sometimes, in your house?" "Eventually. That's what we're hoping," Richard confirmed. "But there are a lot of steps before we get there." The mention of steps reminded Richard of something he'd been meaning to ask. "Emma, your school records list you as 7, but you just graduated kindergarten. Most children in kindergarten are 5 or 6. Did you start school late?" A shadow crossed Emma's face. "Nana tried to register me for 1st grade last year, but they said I needed papers we don't have, so they put me in kindergarten instead. The principal said it was the best they could do without proper documentation." This revelation added another layer to the injustice of Emma's situation. Not only was she living without official recognition, but her education was also being affected. Richard made a mental note to address this once her legal status was secured. Martha joined them for breakfast, moving slowly but with determination. Richard noticed how Emma subtly adjusted everything for her grandmother's comfort, raising a pillow here, moving a cup closer there, all without drawing attention to Martha's limitations. It was the choreography of long practice, a dance of care that no 7-year-old should have had to learn. By mid-morning, Carol arrived with a paralegal assistant. The attorney's professional demeanor softened visibly when introduced to Emma, who shook her hand with grave politeness. "We have quite a project ahead of us," Carol acknowledged after hearing the full details. "Creating a legal identity retrospectively is challenging but not impossible. We'll need affidavits from anyone who can attest to Emma's existence, teachers, doctors, neighbors." "Not Mr. Wilson," Emma interjected firmly. Carol glanced at Richard, who mouthed later over Emma's head. As the adults discussed legal strategies, Emma slipped outside to tend to the marigolds along the walkway. Through the window, Richard watched her methodically watering each plant, her small figure framed against the dilapidated porch. The contrast struck him powerfully, this child's careful nurturing amid structural decay, her capacity for beauty in circumstances that offered so little hope. In that moment, his commitment solidified into something unshakable. The path ahead would be complex and likely fraught with obstacles, but Richard had never backed down from a challenging project, and none had ever mattered more than this one. "We need to move quickly," he told Carol, returning his attention to the legal discussion. "Martha's health is deteriorating, and that neighbor could become a problem." Carol nodded, already drafting preliminary documents. "The court will want to know why you, Richard. Why would a successful architect with no prior connection to this family suddenly want guardianship of a child?" It was the question at the heart of everything, the one Richard had been asking himself since that moment in the school parking lot. The answer came more easily than he expected. "Because she asked," he said simply. "When everyone else walked by, she saw something in me worth asking for help. I want to be the person she believed I could be." As if sensing they were discussing her, Emma glanced up from her gardening and waved. Richard waved back, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders, not as a burden, but as a purpose he hadn't realized he'd been searching for. The bureaucratic labyrinth of creating a legal identity for Emma proved even more complex than anticipated. Each document required to establish her existence demanded another document to verify it, a circular problem that Carol attacked with methodical determination. "It's like building a house without a foundation," Richard observed during one of their strategy sessions at Martha's kitchen table. "We're trying to construct something solid on ground that officially doesn't exist. So we pour the foundation first," Carol replied pragmatically. "Retrospective birth registration, followed by social security application, then school records. Formalization." 3 weeks into the process, they had assembled an impressive collection of affidavits from Martha's pastor attesting to Emma's presence in the church community since infancy, from a retired doctor who had provided occasional off-the-books medical care, from Ms. Roberts detailing Emma's academic progress. Each piece helped construct a legal narrative explaining how Emma had fallen through bureaucratic cracks while establishing her undeniable existence. Meanwhile, Richard divided his time between his architectural firm, where he delegated more responsibility to his associates, and the growing project of stabilizing Emma and Martha's situation. He hired contractors to address the house's most critical issues, the roof, electrical system, and plumbing, while temporarily relocating Martha and Emma to a comfortable extended-stay hotel. "It feels like we're on vacation," Emma whispered to him on their first night at the hotel, her eyes wide as she explored the modest suite with its clean bathroom, reliable hot water, and television. The contrast between what Emma considered luxurious and the actual modesty of their accommodations reinforced Richard's determination to create a more equitable future for her. While material wealth wasn't everything, basic security and comfort shouldn't be unattainable dreams for a child as bright and deserving as Emma. It was during their 3rd week at the hotel that Martha's health took a dramatic turn for the worse. Richard received the call while reviewing plans at his office. Emma's voice small but steady on the phone. "Nana can't breathe right. She says it's fine, but it's not. Her lips look funny." Richard had never driven so fast in his life. The hospital admitted Martha immediately, diagnosing acute congestive heart failure. As she was rushed to the cardiac care unit, a social worker approached Richard and Emma in the waiting room. "Are you family?" she asked, clipboard in hand. The question hung between them, fraught with implications. Their guardianship application was still processing. Legally, Richard had no standing. "He's my dad," Emma stated firmly before Richard could respond, her hand finding his. "And she's my great-grandmother." The conviction in her voice momentarily silenced everyone, including Richard. The social worker made notes, seemingly satisfied, and moved on to practical matters of insurance and next of kin. Later, as Martha slept connected to monitors and oxygen, Richard sat beside Emma in the uncomfortable hospital chairs. "You called? I mean, your dad," he said quietly. Emma examined her shoes, suddenly uncertain. "Was that okay? I know we're not finished with the papers yet." "It was more than okay," Richard assured her, feeling a swell of emotion he didn't try to suppress. "I would be honored to be your dad, Emma, not just on paper." Her smile was like sunrise, gradual then brilliantly transformative. Martha's hospitalization created both urgency and complications for their guardianship process. On one hand, it demonstrated the immediate need for legal arrangements to secure Emma's future. On the other, it forced their situation into greater institutional scrutiny. When Martha was transferred from the cardiac unit to a skilled nursing facility for recovery, news of their arrangement spread through the community. Frank Wilson seized the opportunity to voice his concerns to local authorities, framing Richard's involvement as suspicious and potentially predatory. "I'm just saying it's mighty convenient," Richard overheard Wilson telling a nurse at the facility. "Rich city fellow suddenly interested in a little girl with no legal identity? Something's not right there." The insinuation made Richard's blood boil, but Carol advised restraint. "This is exactly the kind of complication we anticipated," she reminded him. "Focus on the legal process, not the gossip." Easier said than done, especially when the gossip began affecting Emma directly. On her first day back at school after Martha's hospitalization, she encountered whispers and strange looks from parents who had heard Wilson's version of events. "Jenna's mum wouldn't let her sit with me at lunch," Emma reported matter-of-factly that afternoon. "She said you might be a bad person pretending to be nice." Richard struggled to maintain his composure. What do you think about that? Emma considered the question with her characteristic seriousness. I think some grown-ups make up stories when they don't understand things, she finally answered. Like how I told everyone I had a dad who was coming to graduation. I made that up because I was scared of being different. Her insight, profound beyond her years, reminded Richard why he had committed to this challenging path. You're very wise, Emma Taylor. Emma Maxwell, she corrected, testing the name they had discussed. Using once the guardianship was finalized. The hopeful uncertainty in her voice broke his heart and strengthened his resolve simultaneously. The following week brought a critical development. With Martha's health stabilizing but her prognosis still grave, the hospital's social worker, Angela Ramirez, requested a formal meeting with Richard. Her expression was professionally neutral as she closed her office door. Mr. Maxwell, I need to address some concerns that have been raised about your relationship with Emma Jenkins. Richard had anticipated this conversation. You're referring to the rumors Mr. Wilson has been spreading. Angela neither confirmed nor denied. What I'm concerned with is Emma's welfare. Our records show no formal custody arrangement, no legal guardianship, not even a verified birth certificate, yet you've been functioning as her parent. We're in the process of establishing legal guardianship with Martha's full support, Richard explained, presenting the documentation Carol had prepared. Emma's unusual documentation situation stems from circumstances of her infancy. We're working to rectify that. Angela reviewed the papers with professional thoroughness. This is unusual, she acknowledged. Under normal circumstances, Child Protective Services would take custody pending investigation. Richard felt his chest tighten. And in this circumstance? That remains to be determined, she replied carefully. But I should inform you that the department has been contacted by several community members, including a local city councilman, expressing concerns. Wilson's threat about his connection to Councilman Thompson hadn't been empty, Richard realized. The neighbor had been systematically working to undermine them. Ms. Ramirez, Richard said, choosing his words carefully, I understand your obligation to investigate concerns. But separating Emma from both Martha and myself during this process would traumatize her unnecessarily. She's already dealing with her grandmother's illness. Angela's professional mask slipped slightly, revealing genuine concern. I don't disagree, Mr. Maxwell, but I need to follow protocol. What if we expedite the guardianship hearing, Richard proposed. Carol Simmons has contacts in family court. We could request an emergency ruling given Martha's medical situation. The social worker considered this. If you can get a court date within the next 10 days, I could recommend Emma remain in your care pending the hearing outcome. It was a small victory, but significant. As Richard left the hospital, he called Carol, who immediately began working. Her connections to secure the earliest possible court date. That evening, Richard took Emma to visit Martha at the nursing facility. The elderly woman looked frailer than ever against the institutional bedding, but her eyes brightened when she saw them. There's my family, she said, reaching for their hands. Richard noticed how naturally Martha included him in that designation now. In just a few weeks, their improvised arrangement had evolved into something that felt increasingly real and necessary for all of them. As Martha and Emma talked about school and the progress on the house repairs, Richard received a text from Carol, court date secured, Tuesday 9 a.m., Judge Williams presiding. Relief washed over him, followed immediately by anxiety. Judge Sandra Williams had a reputation for being thorough and skeptical, particularly in unusual custody situations. Their case would face intense scrutiny. Good news? Martha asked, noticing his expression. We have a court date for the guardianship. Hearing? Richard confirmed, keeping his tone positive for Emma's benefit. Next Tuesday. Martha nodded, understanding the significance. It's time to make things official. That night, back at the hotel, Richard helped Emma with her homework. A simple math worksheet that she completed with focused determination. As she worked, he marveled at how completely his life had transformed in less than a month. His meticulously organized bachelor existence had given way to this new reality of school projects, medical appointments and legal battles, all centered around a child who had approached him on a whim. "What happens if the judge says no?" Emma asked suddenly, her pencil pausing over the paper. The question caught Richard off guard. He'd been so focused on strategy and preparation that he hadn't considered how Emma was processing the uncertainty. "The judge will make the decision she believes is best for you," he answered honestly. "But Carol is very good at her job, and we have Martha's full support. Those are important factors." Emma set down her pencil entirely now, her eyes serious. "But what if they take me away? Mr. Wilson told Mrs. Peterson that I might go to foster care. Her daughter told me at recess." The casual cruelty of playground gossip, fed by adult speculation, made Richard furious, but he kept his expression calm. "Emma, I promise you this. No matter what happens in court, I will not stop fighting for you. If there are obstacles, we'll overcome them. If there are delays, we'll be patient. But I am not going anywhere." She studied his face with the intensity of a child who had learned early to look for signs of abandonment. Whatever she saw there must have reassured her, because she nodded once, decisively, and returned to her homework. Later, after Emma had fallen asleep in the hotel room's second bed, Richard sat at the small desk, reviewing the documentation for Tuesday's hearing. Everything was technically in order, but their case remained unprecedented. They were asking Judge Williams to grant guardianship to a man with no prior relationship to a child who legally didn't exist, based primarily on the wishes of an elderly woman with no documented legal connection to that same child. It sounded impossible when framed that way. Richard rubbed his temples, fighting fatigue. On the desk beside the legal papers lay Emma's drawing from earlier that evening, a carefully rendered picture of 3 figures holding hands in front of a house. "My family" was written across the top in her precise handwriting. The simple image crystallized what was at stake. This wasn't just about legal documents or bureaucratic processes. It was about preserving the family Emma had drawn, the one she believed in with such conviction that she had literally created it through an act of brave imagination in a school parking. Richard's phone vibrated with an incoming text from Carol. "FYI, Frank Wilson scheduled to testify at hearing as character witness, against you." The message confirmed what Richard had suspected. Wilson was actively working to derail their case. The question was why. Simple neighborhood nosiness couldn't explain the man's persistent interference. Richard made a note to have his firm's investigator look deeper into Frank Wilson's background and his relationship with Martha and Emma. There might be more to the neighbor's opposition than mere suspicion of an outsider. As he finally prepared for bed, Richard glanced at Emma's sleeping form, one hand tucked under her cheek, her breathing deep and trusting. In just weeks, she had come to rely on him, to believe in his promises. The thought of failing her was unbearable. "We're going to be okay," he whispered, though she couldn't hear him. The words were as much to convince himself as anything else. Outside their hotel window, Portland's lights glimmered through a light rain, the city oblivious to the small drama unfolding within its boundaries, a drama that meant everything to the 3 people caught in its center. Sarah Winters arrived at the Maxwell residence precisely at 9 o'clock on Wednesday morning, her government-issued sedan Parallel parked with precision in front of the elegant townhouse. As Portland's most experienced child welfare investigator, she had been specifically assigned to Emma's case following the preliminary guardianship hearing. Judge Williams had granted Richard temporary custody pending a thorough home study and background investigation, a partial victory that came with intense scrutiny. Sarah's reputation preceded her. Known for her unwavering adherence to protocol and deep skepticism of unconventional arrangements, she had earned the nickname "The Regulation" among family court attorneys. Carol had warned Richard that securing Sarah's approval would be their greatest challenge yet. "Good morning, Mr. Maxwell," Sarah greeted him, her handshake firm and professional. "I'll need to see all living areas and speak with Emma privately." Richard welcomed her with respectful cordiality, understanding that antagonizing the investigator would only hurt their cause. "Of course. Emma's finishing breakfast. She's excited to show you her new room." This wasn't entirely true. Emma had been uncharacteristically quiet that morning, her apprehension manifesting in careful, deliberate movements as she arranged and rearranged her cereal in its bowl. The temporary custody arrangement had allowed her to move into Richard's townhouse while Martha remained at the skilled nursing facility, but the transition hadn't been without challenges. Sarah made notes on her clipboard as Richard guided her through the home. His architectural sensibilities had created a space that was both aesthetically sophisticated and surprisingly child-friendly. Emma's bedroom, formerly his rarely used guest room, had been transformed with her input. The walls now a soft blue-green that reminded her of the ocean she'd only seen in books. Emma selected the color, Richard explained, as Sarah inspected the room. We're still adding personal touches. The renovation of Martha's house is progressing, but we've discussed making this Emma's permanent space regardless of the outcome. Sarah's expression revealed nothing as she noted the carefully organized desk with school supplies, the bookshelf filled with age-appropriate literature, and the subtle safety features Richard had incorporated throughout the home. You've made significant changes to accommodate a child, she observed neutrally. Your background indicates no previous experience with parenting. I've been learning, Richard acknowledged. Emma's a good teacher. When they returned to the kitchen, Emma had finished her breakfast and was carefully washing her dishes, a habit from her life with Martha that she maintained despite Richard's assurance that it wasn't necessary. Hello, Emma, Sarah greeted her, kneeling slightly to meet the child's eye level. I'm Ms. Winters. I'd like to talk with you for a little while, if that's okay. Emma dried her hands methodically on a kitchen towel, her gaze shifting between Sarah and Richard. Is this about whether I can stay? The directness of the question momentarily disarmed Sarah. It's about making sure you're in the best possible situation, she clarified. Would you mind showing me your room and telling me about living here? As Emma led Sarah upstairs, Richard fought the urge to follow. This private conversation was standard procedure, but knowing Emma would be questioned about their arrangement, their family, without him present, made his chest tight with anxiety. While waiting, Richard reviewed the documentation Carol had prepared for their next court appearance. The investigation into Frank Wilson had yielded interesting results. The neighbor had twice attempted to purchase Martha's property at significantly below market value, ostensibly to help with her medical expenses. His connection to Councilman Thompson involved development plans for the neighborhood, plans that included demolishing older homes like Martha's to make way for commercial properties. Wilson's opposition suddenly made more sense. If Richard succeeded in becoming Emma's guardian, he would likely also control Martha's property eventually, property Wilson and his political ally coveted. Upstairs, Emma sat cross-legged on her bed while Sarah asked carefully structured questions designed to assess her comfort, safety, and emotional well-being. Do you miss living with your nana? Sarah inquired, noting Emma's poised responses. Every day, Emma answered honestly. But we visit her, and Richard says once she's stronger, she can either live with us or in her house after it's fixed. I like having my own room, though. At Nana's, I slept on a cot in her room so I could help if she needed medicine at night. Sarah's pen paused. You were responsible for her medication? Emma nodded matter-of-factly. I know all her pills. Which ones are for her heart? Which ones are for pain? Which ones make her sleepy? I had a chart I made with colors and times. The casual description of responsibilities far beyond her years reinforced the unusual nature of Emma's upbringing. Sarah made detailed notes before continuing. And how do you feel about Mr. Maxwell becoming your guardian? Emma considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness. He keeps his promises, she finally said. And he doesn't pretend things are okay when they're not. Some grown-ups lie to make you feel better, but Richard tells the truth even when it's hard. She smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her bedspread. Also, he makes really good pancakes. The simple addition made Sarah smile despite her professional reserve. That's important, she agreed. When they returned downstairs, Richard was working at his laptop at the dining table. He closed it immediately, his attention shifting entirely to them. We had a good talk, Sarah informed him, her tone revealing nothing of her assessment. I'll need to see Emma's school environment next. I understand she's transferred to Lakeside Elementary. Richard nodded. It's closer to the townhouse. Ms. Roberts at Westbrook provided excellent transition notes, and the administration has been very supportive. What Richard didn't mention was the difficulty Emma had experienced in her new school environment. Children were innately sensitive to unusual family situations, and despite the staff's best efforts, Emma's mid-year transfer and unconventional guardianship had made her an object of curiosity and occasional unkindness. After scheduling the school visit, Sarah departed with a promise to be in touch soon. As her car pulled away, Richard turned to Emma. "How did it go? Was Ms. Winters nice to you?" Emma shrugged, her expression guarded. She asked a lot of questions about Nana's house and how we lived. She looked up at Richard with sudden worry. "Did I say the wrong things? Sometimes I forget what parts we're supposed to keep private." The question broke Richard's heart. Emma had spent so much of her young life navigating secrets and half-truths out of necessity. Even now, with their situation improving, she carried the burden of constantly calculating what was safe to reveal. "You didn't say anything wrong," he assured her, kneeling to meet her eyes. "From now on, we tell the truth, Emma. The whole truth. No more secrets or pretending." Her relief was visible. "Even about how we met." "Especially about that," Richard confirmed. "That's the best part of our story." Later that afternoon, they visited Martha at the nursing facility. Her condition had stabilized, though her prognosis remained guarded. The skilled care and proper medication had worked wonders compared to the inadequate treatment she'd been able to access before. "Sarah Winters came today," Emma reported, carefully arranging the flowers they'd brought on Martha's bedside table. She asked lots of questions about living with Richard. Martha's eyes met Richard's over Emma's head. "And how did that go?" "I think it went well," Richard answered cautiously. "Emma was very honest and articulate. I told her about the pancakes," Emma added seriously. Martha smiled, the expression transforming her tired face. "Always lead with the important information." As Emma settled into the chair beside Martha's bed, with a book she'd brought to read aloud, Richard stepped into the hallway to take a call from Carol. "Judge Williams has requested another hearing," his attorney informed him without preamble. "Apparently, some new information has come to light that she wants to address before proceeding with the final guardianship determination." Richard's stomach tightened. "What information?" "That's the concerning part. They're not saying. But Frank Wilson met with the county prosecutor yesterday, and Councilman Thompson was seen at the courthouse this morning. The implications were clear. Their opponents were making moves behind the scenes, using political connections to influence the legal process." "What's our strategy?" Richard asked, watching through the door's window as Emma animatedly read to Martha, both of them momentarily free from worry. "For now, we continue as planned," Carol advised. "The home study, the school integration, Martha's medical care, everything by the book. But I'm also preparing motions to address potential challenges to your character or motivations." Wilson's been talking, and not just to officials. Richard had noticed the subtle changes in how some acquaintances interacted with him, the slightly too casual inquiries about his situation, the speculative glances when he was seen with Emma in public. Wilson's insinuations had spread through Portland's social circles, creating an undercurrent of suspicion. "Whatever it takes, Carol, I made a promise." After ending the call, Richard rejoined Emma and Martha, forcing a smile he didn't feel. The elderly woman saw through it immediately. "Trouble?" she asked quietly, when Emma became absorbed in her reading. Richard nodded slightly. "Nothing. We can't handle." Martha's gaze was knowing. "This old woman has caused you quite a lot of complications, Mr. Maxwell." "Richard," he corrected gently, "and you haven't caused anything. You've given Emma 7 years of love and protection under impossible circumstances. I'm just trying to continue what you started." Martha's eyes welled with tears. She quickly blinked away. "I've been lying to that child her entire life, telling her I was getting better when I was getting worse, telling her our situation was temporary when I knew it was collapsing around us." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I was so afraid of losing." her that I never prepared her for what was coming. Richard understood Martha's guilt, but also recognized the impossible choices she had faced. You did what you thought was best with the options you had. That's all any of us can do. She trusts you, Martha observed, watching Emma turn the pages of her book. That doesn't come easily to her. I know, Richard acknowledged. I won't betray that trust. The following week brought new challenges. Emma's integration at Lakeside Elementary had been rocky from the start, but things deteriorated after a particularly difficult incident in the lunchroom. A fifth-grade boy, repeating gossip he'd overheard from his parents, loudly questioned why Emma had a pretend dad. Everyone knows he's not really your father, the boy had announced to the entire table. My mom says he's probably some weirdo. Emma's response had been characteristic of her resilience, calm, measured, and devastatingly honest. He became my dad because I asked him to, she had replied, and he said yes when everyone else said no. The simplicity of her answer had silenced the lunchroom momentarily, but the damage was done. By afternoon, Richard received a call from the principal requesting a meeting to discuss integration concerns. Now sitting across from Principal Adrian Foster, Richard struggled to maintain his professional composure. Emma is experiencing significant social challenges, Principal Foster explained delicately. The unusual nature of your guardianship situation has become a topic of discussion among parents. You mean the rumors Frank Wilson has been spreading, Richard clarified, his tone even despite his anger. Principal Foster looked uncomfortable. Mr. Wilson does have children in our district, though not at Lakeside specifically. I understand there's some history there. The history is that he's deliberately attempting to undermine my guardianship of Emma for his own financial gain, Richard stated flatly. And now children are repeating his insinuations to Emma during lunch. To her credit, Principal Foster appeared genuinely concerned. I assure you, Mr. Maxwell, we have a zero-tolerance policy for bullying. The student involved has been disciplined appropriately. That addresses the symptom, not the cause, Richard pointed out. Emma's living situation is unusual, yes, but it's also completely legitimate. The court has granted temporary custody, and we expect permanent guardianship to be finalized soon. Perhaps a statement from the family court would help clarify matters for our parent community, Principal Foster suggested. Something official explaining Emma's status. The request was reasonable, but Richard knew it would require navigating more bureaucracy when they were already fighting on multiple fronts. Still, Emma's school experience was too important to ignore. I'll speak with our attorney, he promised. That evening, as Richard helped Emma with a science project about ecosystems, he gently broached the subject of school. Principal Foster mentioned there was some trouble at lunch yesterday. Emma's hands stilled over the diorama they were creating. Jason Edwards said you weren't my real dad. She kept her eyes on the project, carefully placing a tiny paper tree. He said his mum told him you're pretending. Richard took a deep breath, carefully choosing his words. Families come together in different ways, Emma. Some through birth, some through marriage, some through adoption or guardianship. What makes a family real isn't how it started, but the commitment people make to each other. Emma considered this, her expression serious. So you're my real dad because you decided to be, not because of papers or because you had to be. Exactly, Richard confirmed, something warm expanding in his chest at her understanding. The legal papers are important for practical reasons, but they don't create the relationship. We do that ourselves every day through our choices. Emma nodded, seemingly satisfied with this explanation. Then she asked the question Richard had been dreading. Is Sarah Winters going to say, I can't live with you anymore? The vulnerability in her voice made Richard want to promise everything would be fine, to offer the kind of comforting lie adults often tell children. But he had committed to honesty with Emma, even when it was difficult. I don't know, he admitted. She's still evaluating our situation, but I can promise you this. No matter what happens with Ms. Winters or the judge or anyone else, I will always be here for you. If there are obstacles, we'll face them together. Emma absorbed this, then returned to her project with renewed focus. We should add more animals to the forest part, she decided. Ecosystems need balance. Richard marveled at her resilience, her ability to acknowledge difficult truths and still move forward with hope and determination. It was a quality he was trying to learn from her. Later, after Emma had gone to bed, Richard received an unexpected text from Sarah Winters. "Need to meet tomorrow. Important development. My office, 9 a.m. The message's brevity and urgency sent a chill through him. He immediately called Carol, who agreed to accompany him to the meeting. "Don't panic yet," his attorney advised. "This could be procedural or even positive news." But as Richard checked on sleeping Emma one last time before retiring to his own room, he couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental was about to change. The peace they had carefully constructed over the past months suddenly felt fragile, like a house built on shifting ground. "We'll be okay," he whispered, echoing the promise he'd made that night in the hotel. But as he closed Emma's door, he wondered if this was one promise he might not be able to keep. Sarah Winters' office was meticulously organized, with case files aligned precisely on her desk and credentials displayed in perfectly straight frames on the wall. Richard and Carol sat across from her, the ticking of a wall clock marking the uncomfortable silence as Sarah reviewed documents before addressing them. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," she finally said, her professional demeanor betraying nothing. "There's been a significant development in Emma's case that requires immediate attention." Richard tensed, preparing for the worst. Had Wilson's accusations gained traction? Had Judge Williams discovered something in their documentation that contradicted their narrative? "Martha Jenkins has disappeared from the nursing facility," Sarah stated matter-of-factly. The news hit Richard like a physical blow. "What? When?" "Sometime between midnight and 5 a.m. The night staff checked on her at midnight, and when the morning shift arrived, her bed was empty." Sarah referenced her notes. According to the facility director, Ms. Jenkins had been increasingly agitated yesterday, insisting she needed to fix something before it was too late. Richard's mind raced. Martha was in no condition to travel independently. Her heart condition severely limited her mobility and stamina. Someone must have helped her leave. "Has anyone checked Frank Wilson's house?" he asked, the pieces suddenly connecting. Martha mentioned he'd been visiting her at the facility, despite her requests that he stay away. Sarah's expression remained neutral. "Mr. Wilson has been interviewed. He claims no knowledge of Ms. Jenkins's whereabouts, though he did confirm visiting her yesterday afternoon." Carol leaned forward, her attorney's instincts engaged. "This timing is extremely suspicious. Our final guardianship hearing is scheduled for tomorrow. Martha's testimony is crucial to our case." "That's not all," Sarah continued, removing another document from her folder. "The birth registration affidavit we submitted for Emma has been challenged. Someone has filed a formal complaint alleging fraud." "Wilson," Richard stated flatly. It wasn't a question. Sarah neither confirmed nor denied, but her slight hesitation was telling. The challenge raises questions about the authenticity of Martha's original statement regarding the circumstances of finding Emma as an infant. Without this foundation, the entire legal identity we've been constructing becomes questionable. The strategic brilliance of the attack was undeniable. By undermining Martha's credibility and ensuring her absence from court, their opponents had created a perfect storm. Without Martha to testify about Emma's origins, and with the birth registration in doubt, their case was suddenly on dangerously shaky ground. "This is coordinated obstruction," Carol stated firmly, "and I intend to file motions addressing it immediately. Martha Jenkins' disappearance should be treated as a missing person case, possibly even kidnapping given her medical condition." Sarah closed her folder with deliberate care. "I've already filed the missing person report. As for the fraud allegation, Judge Williams has requested all parties appear for an emergency hearing this afternoon instead of tomorrow, as originally scheduled." Richard struggled to process the implications. "What about Emma? She's at school now, expecting everything to proceed as planned." "That's why I called you in," Sarah acknowledged, her professional mask slipping slightly to reveal genuine concern. "As Emma's temporary guardian, you need to prepare her for potential outcomes. If Judge Williams finds merit in these new challenges, she may order Emma placed in temporary state custody until matters are resolved. The possibility Richard had been dreading was suddenly immediate and real. Carol immediately began outlining legal counter-strategies, but Richard found himself unable to focus on the technical details. All he could think about was Emma, how she would interpret this disruption, how it would reinforce her deepest fears about impermanence and abandonment. "I need to get her from school," he said, standing abruptly. "She shouldn't hear about any of this from anyone else." Sarah nodded with unexpected sympathy. "That would be appropriate. The hearing is at 3 o'clock. Judge Williams will want to speak with Emma privately as well." As Richard drove to Lakeside, elementary, his mind worked furiously to formulate a plan. Martha's disappearance was the key, both to understanding what was happening and potentially to salvaging their case. The elderly woman might be physically frail, but her mind remained sharp. If she had left the facility voluntarily, she must have had a compelling reason. Richard contacted his firm's investigator from the car, authorizing whatever resources were needed to locate Martha quickly. Then he called the nursing facility directly, speaking with staff who had interacted with her in the hours before her disappearance. She was upset after Mr. Wilson's visit, a nurse's aide reported. Asked for her personal items from storage. Some old papers she kept in a metal box. Said she needed to make something right before it was too late. This detail struck Richard as significant. What papers could be important enough for Martha to risk her health by leaving medical care? What was she trying to make right? At Lakeside Elementary, Richard signed Emma out early, offering the office staff a vague explanation about a family matter. When Emma emerged from her classroom, backpack in hand, her expression immediately turned concerned. "Is Nana okay?" she asked, her intuition zeroing in on the most likely reason for the disruption. Richard led her to the car before answering, wanting privacy for the difficult conversation ahead. Once they were settled, he turned to face her directly. "Emma, I need to tell you something concerning, but I don't want you to panic. Nana left the nursing home last night. We don't know where she is right now, but lots of people are looking for her." Emma's face paled, but her voice remained steady. "She went to get the box." Richard stared at her, momentarily speechless. "What box, Emma?" "The metal box with my papers," Emma explained, as if this should be obvious. "She keeps it, hidden under the floorboard in her room. She told me never to tell anyone about it, but I think you need to know now." Richard's heart raced with sudden hope. "Did Nana tell you what's in this box?" Emma nodded solemnly. "My real papers, from when she found me. She said they were too dangerous to show anyone because bad people might take me away, but that someday when I was older, they would protect me." This revelation changed everything. If Martha had documentation of Emma's origins, authentic documentation she had concealed out of fear, it could potentially address the challenges to their case. "Do you know where Nana might have gone?" Richard asked gently. Emma considered this carefully. "The church, maybe. She always said Pastor Michael was the only other person who knew the whole truth. Or maybe our house to get the box if it's still there." Richard immediately called his investigator with these new leads, then contacted Carol to update her on the development. As they spoke, Emma sat quietly in the passenger seat, her small hands folded in her lap, her expression far too serious for a 7-year-old. When Richard ended the call, he found Emma watching him intently. "Are they going to take me away today?" she asked directly. The question broke his heart with its matter-of-fact acceptance of potential abandonment. "I don't know," he answered honestly. "There's a hearing this afternoon where a judge will decide what happens next. But I promise you, Emma, no matter what the judge decides today, this is temporary. I will not stop fighting for us to be together." Emma absorbed this with the resilience that continued to amaze him. "If they take me to a different place, will I still get to visit Nana when they find her?" "Absolutely," Richard assured her, though in truth he wasn't certain of anything anymore. The system that was supposed to protect children sometimes created more trauma in its rigid application of rules that didn't account for unique situations like theirs. They drove to Richard's townhouse to prepare for the hearing, both lost in thought. Richard made Emma's favorite lunch, grilled cheese sandwiches cut into triangles, but neither had much appetite. As they were getting ready to leave for court, Richard's phone rang with an unknown number. "Mr. Maxwell?" A hesitant male voice asked. "This is Pastor Michael from Grace Community Church. I believe you're looking for Martha Jenkins." Richard's grip on the phone tightened. "Is she with you?" "She was," the pastor confirmed. "She came to the church very early this morning, quite exhausted from the journey. She asked me to retrieve some documents she had entrusted to me years ago. Then she insisted on continuing to her house. I tried to convince her to let me call you or medical services, but she was quite determined." "How long ago did she leave?" Richard asked, already grabbing his keys. "About an hour ago. I arranged transportation for her with a church volunteer. I've been wrestling with whether to call, given Martha's desire for privacy, but her condition concerned me greatly." Richard thanked the pastor and quickly explained the situation to Emma as they hurried to the car. "We're going to check Nana's house before the hearing. She might be there." The renovation of Martha's house had progressed significantly over the past months, with the exterior now fully repaired and the interior partially updated. As they pulled up, Richard was relieved to see lights on inside. Someone was definitely there. "Stay close to me," he instructed Emma as they approached the front door, which stood slightly ajar. Inside, they found Martha sitting at the kitchen table, a metal box open before her, papers spread across the surface. She looked up as they entered, her expression a complex mixture of exhaustion, relief, and determination. "You found me," she said simply. "Good. There isn't much time." Richard rushed to her side, immediately concerned by her pallor and labored breathing. "Martha, you need medical attention. Let me call an ambulance." She waved him off with surprising firmness. "First things first. Emma, come here, child." Emma approached cautiously, her eyes wide as she took in the scene. Martha reached for her hand, then looked up at Richard. "I haven't been entirely truthful," she admitted, "about how Emma came to me." Richard felt a chill of apprehension. "Martha, whatever it is, we can address it after getting you medical help." Martha shook her head stubbornly. "No more delays. Emma deserves the truth, and you need these papers for court." She indicated the documents on the table. "I didn't find Emma abandoned at the church, as I've claimed. She was brought to me." Richard sat down slowly, sensing the significance of what Martha was about to reveal. "My niece Abigail was Emma's birth mother," Martha continued, her voice strengthening despite her obvious physical weakness. "She was very young, involved with a married man. When she became pregnant, she was desperate and alone. I helped her through the pregnancy in secret, but she wasn't ready to be a mother." Emma listened intently, her expression unreadable as she absorbed this new information about her origins. "After Emma was born, Abigail asked me to take the baby temporarily while she sorted her life out. She provided a proper birth certificate, signed custody papers, everything legal." Martha indicated the documents on the table. "But then Abigail was in an accident. She didn't survive." Richard fought to process this revelation. "So all this time, you actually had legal documentation for Emma?" Martha nodded, shame evident in her expression. "The papers established me as Emma's legal guardian after Abigail's passing, but I was afraid. Abigail's relationship with Emma's father had been complicated. He was a powerful man in the community, married with other children. I feared if he learned about Emma, he might try to take her or deny her existence entirely." The pieces suddenly clicked into place for Richard. "Frank Wilson," he stated, the certainty settling in his chest like a stone. "Wilson is Emma's biological father." Martha's eyes widened in surprise. "How did you know?" "His obsession with interfering, his attempts to purchase your property, his campaign to undermine our guardianship application. It all makes sense now." Richard's mind raced with the implications. He must have discovered the connection somehow. "Recently, yes," Martha confirmed. "He found old letters from Abigail while helping me organize papers for a senior center application last year. He's been pressuring me ever since, first to sell him the house, then to give him information about Emma. I refused." Emma, who had been silent throughout this revelation, finally spoke. "Is that why Mr. Wilson always watches me, because he's my real father?" Martha squeezed Emma's hand. "He contributed to your existence, Emma, but that doesn't make him your father. A real father chooses to love and protect his child, like Richard has chosen to love and protect you." The distinction seemed to reassure Emma, who nodded thoughtfully. Richard, meanwhile, was rapidly assessing how this new information would affect their case. "Martha, these documents could change everything. With proof of your legal guardianship and Emma's actual birth certificate, we can address the challenges to our case directly." He checked his watch. "But the hearing starts in less than an hour, and you need medical attention." Martha pushed the papers toward Richard with trembling hands. "Take these to court. I've signed a statement explaining everything, including a formal transfer of guardianship to you. Pastor Michael witnessed it this morning." Richard gathered the documents carefully, recognizing their crucial importance. "I'm calling an ambulance for you, Martha. No arguments." As he made the call, Emma sat beside her grandmother, holding her hand and whispering reassurances. The role reversal, child comforting adult, highlighted once again the unusual maturity Emma had developed through her circumstances. The paramedics arrived quickly, assessing Martha with professional efficiency. Her condition was stable, enough for transport, but they confirmed Richard's assessment that she needed immediate medical care. As they prepared to move her, Martha reached for Richard one last time. "The truth will help you now," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I should have trusted the system, and you, much sooner." Richard squeezed her hand gently. "You did what you thought was necessary to protect Emma. No one can fault you for that." As Martha was loaded into the ambulance, Richard and Emma prepared to head to the courthouse. The documents secure in Richard's briefcase represented both hope and complication, proof of Emma's legal status, but also evidence that Martha had misrepresented crucial facts throughout their guardianship process. "Will the judge be angry that Nana didn't tell the truth before?" Emma asked as they drove downtown, her perceptiveness once again cutting to the heart of the matter. "She might have questions," Richard acknowledged, "but I think she'll understand why Nana kept these secrets. She was trying to protect you, even if her methods weren't perfect." Emma considered this. "Like how I told everyone I had a dad coming to graduation. I wasn't being bad, I was just scared." "Exactly," Richard affirmed, continuously amazed by Emma's emotional intelligence. "Sometimes people make complicated choices when they're afraid." As they approached the courthouse, Richard received a text from Carol. "Wilson arrived with councilman Thompson and an attorney. Sarah Winter's also here. Where are you?" Richard quickly explained their detour and the discovery of the documents. Carol's response was immediate. "Game changer. Hurry." The courthouse loomed ahead, its imposing architecture designed to inspire confidence in the justice system. As Richard parked, he turned to Emma one last time. "Whatever happens in there, remember two things. First, I love you and will never stop fighting for you. Second, you've done nothing wrong. The complicated adult problems are not your fault or responsibility." Emma unbuckled her seatbelt and reached for his hand. "I know. That's what you always tell me." Her small face was solemn but composed. "I'm ready." Together they walked up the courthouse steps, the metal box and its revelatory contents potentially reshaping their future with each step. Behind them, the ambulance carrying Martha had already disappeared toward the hospital, its urgency a reminder of how precarious their improvised family remained. Inside, Carol waited at the entrance to Judge Williams' courtroom, her expression shifting from concern to relief as she spotted them. "Thank God," she murmured, quickly examining the documents Richard presented. Her eyes widened as she absorbed their significance. "This changes our entire approach. Wilson won't be expecting this." As if summoned by his name, Frank Wilson appeared at the end of the hallway, flanked by Councilman Thompson and a sharp-dressed attorney Richard recognized as one of Portland's most aggressive family law specialists. Wilson's step faltered slightly when he spotted Emma, his expression unreadable from a distance. "Is that him?" Emma whispered, pressing closer to Richard's side. "Is that the man who—" "Yes," Richard confirmed quietly. "But remember what Martha said. Biology isn't what makes a family." Emma nodded, her grip on Richard's hand tightening as they prepared to enter the courtroom where their future would be decided. Judge Sandra Williams commanded the courtroom with quiet authority, her salt-and-pepper hair pulled back in a practical bun, her gaze sharp as she reviewed the last-minute documents Carol had submitted. The emergency hearing had drawn unexpected attention. Several social workers, court clerks, and even a family court mediator had found reasons to be present for what was rapidly becoming the most unusual guardianship case in recent Portland history. Richard sat beside Carol at their table, his posture deliberately relaxed for Emma's benefit, despite the tension knotting his shoulders. Emma had been escorted to a waiting room with a court-appointed child advocate, standard procedure for family court hearings involving minors, but would be called in later to speak with the judge privately. At the opposing table, Frank Wilson whispered urgently to his attorney, his expression darkening as he presumably learned of the new documentation. Councilman Thompson sat slightly apart, his political instincts clearly assessing how to distance himself if things went poorly. Sarah Winters occupied a middle position, representing neither side but the interests of the state and, theoretically, Emma herself. Her expression remained professionally neutral, though Richard thought he detected a hint of satisfaction as Wilson's confident demeanor began to crumble. Judge Williams finally looked up from the documents, her gaze sweeping the courtroom. "These are highly unusual circumstances," she began, her tone measured. "We have before us a guardianship petition complicated by newly discovered documentation that significantly alters the factual basis of the case." She turned her attention directly to Frank Wilson. "Mr. Wilson, the court now has evidence suggesting you are the biological father of Emma Taylor, born Emma Jenkins. Do you wish to address this assertion?" Wilson shifted uncomfortably, conferring quickly with his attorney before responding. "Your Honor, I recently became aware of the possibility, but have had no opportunity to verify this claim through proper channels. Yet you've been actively opposing Mr. Maxwell's guardianship petition without disclosing this potential relationship," Judge Williams observed, her tone sharpening. "The court doesn't look favorably on parties withholding relevant information." "Mr. Wilson." Wilson's attorney immediately intervened. "Your Honor, my client was operating on limited information. He had legitimate concerns about Mr. Maxwell's sudden interest in a child with no apparent prior connection." Judge Williams consulted her notes. These legitimate concerns included spreading unsubstantiated rumors about Mr. Maxwell's character and motivations throughout the community, if Ms. Winters' reports are accurate. She looked to Sarah for confirmation. "My investigation found multiple instances of Mr. Wilson making insinuations to school personnel, neighbors, and local officials," Sarah confirmed crisply. "These appear to have been calculated to undermine Mr. Maxwell's reputation and standing." Wilson's face flushed with anger, but his attorney placed a restraining hand on his arm. Judge Williams continued reviewing the documents, focusing now on Martha's notarized statement. Martha Jenkins' account clarifies much, though it raises serious questions about her previous testimony. The judge looked at Carol. "Where is Ms. Jenkins now? I'd like to hear directly from her." "Ms. Jenkins was transported to Portland General Hospital this morning," Carol explained. "She left her care facility against medical advice to retrieve. These documents apparently concerned they might be discovered or destroyed before the hearing." Richard noticed Wilson's slight flinch at this statement. Confirmation, perhaps, that Martha's fears hadn't been unfounded. Judge Williams frowned. "Her condition?" "Stable but serious," Richard answered, having received an update from the hospital just before entering the courtroom. "Her cardiologist has restricted visitors to medical personnel only for the next 24 hours. The judge nodded, making notes. "Let's address the central issue. These documents establish Martha Jenkins as Emma's legal guardian following the passing of her niece, Abigail Jenkins. They include Emma's birth certificate, which lists father unknown, despite Ms. Jenkins' claim in her statement that Mr. Wilson is the biological father." Wilson's attorney immediately seized on this point, which raises questions about the authenticity of these conveniently discovered documents, Your Honor. If they're genuine, why wouldn't the father's name be listed? Because Abigail knew what kind of man he was, came a clear voice from the back of the courtroom. All heads turned to see Pastor Michael standing in the doorway, his clerical collar visible beneath his sweater. Forgive the interruption, Your Honor, but I believe I can provide context that might help the court. Judge Williams considered this unexpected development, then nodded. Approach and identify yourself for the record. The pastor moved forward, his manner respectful but determined. Michael Donovan, pastor at Grace Community Church for the past 22 years. I've known Martha Jenkins all that time, and I was present when her niece Abigail came to her for help 8 years ago. After being sworn in, Pastor Michael provided testimony that supported Martha's written statement while adding crucial details. He described Abigail's fear of Wilson, who had threatened to destroy her reputation if she revealed their relationship or the pregnancy. He confirmed witnessing the original guardianship transfer and explained his role in helping Martha protect Emma from Wilson's potential interest. Martha believed, perhaps incorrectly, that the system wouldn't adequately protect Emma from a man with Mr. Wilson's local connections and resources, Pastor Michael explained. Her methods may have been flawed, but her intentions were solely focused on Emma's welfare. As the pastor spoke, Richard observed Wilson's progressive discomfort. The narrative being constructed contradicted the image he had carefully cultivated. In the community, respected businessman, political ally, family man. When Pastor Michael finished, Judge Williams turned to Wilson directly. Mr. Wilson, do you wish to contest any of this testimony? Wilson conferred with his attorney, clearly struggling with his response. Finally, he addressed the court. I had no knowledge of Abigail's pregnancy, he stated, his tone defensive. If I had known about Emma, things would have been different. Different how? Judge Williams pressed. Would you have acknowledged her as your daughter, provided support, or pressured Ms. Jenkins to terminate the pregnancy as Pastor Donovan suggests? Wilson's lack of immediate response spoke volumes. His attorney quickly intervened. Your Honor, ancient history isn't relevant to the current guardianship question. If my client is indeed Emma's biological father, he has inherent rights that supersede both Martha Jenkins' outdated guardianship and Mr. Maxwell's recent petition. This was the moment Richard had feared, Wilson attempting to assert parental rights now that Emma's existence had been officially established. Carol, anticipating this move, was already prepared. Your Honor, if Mr. Wilson wishes to pursue paternity claims, he would need to undergo testing and initiate separate proceedings. However, I'd direct the court's attention to Oregon Revised, Statute 109.096, which addresses the rights of a biological father who has not established paternity. As Carol outlined the legal precedents limiting Wilson's ability to suddenly claim parental rights after years of absence and no support, Richard thought about Emma, waiting in the other room, a child whose existence had been concealed, revealed, disputed, and now potentially fought over by adults with conflicting motivations. Regardless of biological connections, Carol concluded, the court's primary consideration must be Emma's best interests, and the evidence overwhelmingly supports Mr. Maxwell as the appropriate guardian. Judge Williams nodded thoughtfully. I believe it's time to hear from Emma herself. Ms. Winters, would you please bring her in for our conversation? As Sarah left to retrieve Emma, an uncomfortable silence fell over the courtroom. Richard met Wilson's gaze across the room, seeing, for the first time, not just an adversary but a man confronting the consequences of choices made years ago. There was anger there, certainly, but also something else, perhaps regret, or simply the discomfort of having long-buried secrets exposed to public scrutiny. Emma entered the courtroom holding Sarah's hand, her posture straight despite her obvious nervousness. She wore the blue dress she and Richard had chosen for the occasion, her hair neatly braided, the picture of a well-cared-for child despite the turmoil surrounding her. Hello, Emma, Judge Williams greeted her warmly, her stern demeanor softening. Thank you for coming to talk with me today. I know courts can be intimidating places. Emma nodded solemnly. Richard explained that you're the person who decides where I get to live. That's part of my job, yes, the judge confirmed. I have to make sure children are in safe, loving homes where they can thrive. Would you mind talking with me privately for a few minutes? Just us and Ms. Winters. As the others filed out of the courtroom, Richard gave Emma an encouraging smile. She returned it with remarkable composure, though he noted how she deliberately avoided looking in Wilson's direction. The waiting period seemed interminable. Richard paced the hallway while Carol reviewed notes and made calls. Wilson and his attorney huddled in intense conversation at the far end of the corridor, occasionally glancing in Richard's direction. After what felt like hours, but was likely only 20 minutes, Sarah emerged to call them back into the courtroom. Emma was no longer present, having been escorted back to the waiting room. Judge Williams' expression gave nothing away as she addressed the reconvened hearing. I've spoken with Emma and considered all evidence and testimony presented today. This case presents unusual challenges, but my responsibility remains clear: to determine the arrangement that best serves Emma's welfare and development. She turned her attention to the documents before her. The evidence establishes several key facts. First, Martha Jenkins became Emma's legal guardian following the passing of her mother, Abigail Jenkins. Second, Martha concealed Emma's existence from Mr. Wilson based on her understanding of potential risks. Third, Mr. Maxwell has, in a remarkably short time, created a stable and nurturing environment for Emma while facilitating her continued relationship with Martha. Judge Williams looked directly at Wilson. Mr. Wilson, should you wish to pursue paternity and potential visitation rights, that would require separate proceedings. However, I strongly suggest consulting with your attorney about the significant legal hurdles involved, particularly given your absence during Emma's formative years. Wilson's face darkened, but he remained silent as the judge continued. After careful consideration, I am granting temporary guardianship of Emma Taylor to Richard Maxwell for a period of 2 years, with the following conditions: regular home visits by family services, continued therapeutic support for Emma's adjustment, and facilitated visitation with Martha Jenkins as her health permits. Relief washed over Richard like a physical wave, though he maintained his composed expression. 2 years wasn't permanence, but it was a significant victory, time for their family bonds to strengthen and for Emma's life to stabilize. Additionally, Judge Williams continued, I am ordering a comprehensive review of the circumstances surrounding Emma's documentation and Martha Jenkins' previous testimony. While I believe her actions were motivated by genuine concern for Emma's welfare, this court cannot condone misrepresentation, regardless of intent. The judge's gaze swept the courtroom, her expression stern. Let me be absolutely clear. Emma's well-being is this court's paramount concern. Any attempts to manipulate proceedings through rumors, political pressure, or strategic obstruction will be met with severe consequences. This child has endured enough uncertainty. With that, Judge Williams adjourned the hearing. As people began gathering their things, Richard immediately sought out Sarah Winters. Can I take Emma home now? He asked, the simple question encompassing all his hopes. Sarah nodded, her professional demeanor softening slightly. You can. I'll need to schedule our first home visit for next week, but otherwise continue as you have been. She hesitated, then added, You've done well by her, Mr. Maxwell, better than many would have in such complicated circumstances. As Richard turned to collect his briefcase, he found Frank Wilson standing behind him, his expression unreadable. This isn't over, Wilson said quietly, though without the venom Richard had expected. That girl is my blood. Richard met his gaze steadily. Emma is her own person, not an extension of your biology or your ego. If you truly care about her welfare, you'll consider what she needs rather than what you want. Something flickered in Wilson's eyes, perhaps recognition of the truth in Richard's words, or perhaps merely calculation of his next move. Without responding, he turned and left, Councilman Thompson falling into step beside him, already distancing himself from the controversy with practiced political skill. Emma was waiting in the anteroom, her small legs swinging as she sat patiently on a bench. When she saw Richard, her expression was cautiously hopeful. "Can I go home with you?" she asked, the question identical to the one she'd posed after their very first court appearance months ago. "Yes," Richard confirmed, his heart full. "We're going home together." The drive back to the townhouse was quiet, both of them processing the day's revelations and relief. As Richard prepared dinner, a celebration meal of Emma's favorite spaghetti and meatballs, she sat at the kitchen counter, watching him with thoughtful eyes. "Is Mr. Wilson very mad?" she finally asked. Richard considered how to answer honestly without burdening her. "He's disappointed with the judge's decision. He might still try to be part of your life someday, but that would happen slowly, and only if it's good for you." Emma nodded, absorbing this. "I don't hate him or anything, I just don't know him." "That's a very mature perspective," Richard observed, once again impressed by her emotional intelligence. "Nana always said feelings are like weather, they change." "And that's normal," Emma explained. "Right now I mostly feel happy that I get to stay with you." Later that evening they visited Martha at the hospital. Though she remained in intensive care, her condition had stabilized enough to allow brief visits. She was awake but weak, oxygen, tubes in her nose and monitors tracking her vital signs. "You did it," she whispered to Richard, her voice barely audible over the medical equipment. "Kept your promise." "We did it," Richard corrected gently. "Your courage made this possible, Martha." Emma carefully climbed onto the edge of the hospital bed to show Martha the guardianship papers Judge Williams had signed. As the elderly woman examined them with tears in her eyes, Richard was struck by the circular nature of their journey. From Emma's desperate request in a school parking lot to this moment of hard-won security. 2 years, Martha noted, her finger tracing the time limitation. "The first step," Richard assured her. "We'll apply for permanent guardianship when the time comes, and eventually formal adoption if that's what Emma wants." Martha's expression softened as she looked at Emma. "And what do you want, my brave girl?" Emma considered the question with characteristic seriousness. "I want us to be a real family, not pretend anymore." "I think we already are," Richard said quietly. "The papers just help other people see it." In the weeks that followed, their lives settled into a new normal. Martha's health improved enough for her to transfer to a rehabilitation facility closer to Richard's townhouse, allowing for more frequent visits. The renovations on her original home continued, with plans to eventually convert it into a small community center for children, a fitting legacy for the house that had sheltered Emma for her first 7 years. Frank Wilson maintained a low profile after the hearing, his political aspirations seemingly dampened by the public revelation of his past behavior. Through his attorney, he occasionally requested updates on Emma, but made no aggressive moves to assert paternity or visitation rights. Whether this restraint stemmed from legal advice or genuine reflection on Richard's parting words remained unclear. Emma's integration at Lakeside Elementary improved steadily as the legal drama faded from community gossip. Her academic performance, always strong, blossomed further with the stability of her new home life. The therapy sessions Judge Williams had mandated proved beneficial, providing Emma a safe space to process her complex feelings about her origins and identity. On a crisp autumn morning, 1 year later, Emma stood before her former classmates at Westbrook Elementary, invited back as part of a special program on community resilience. Now 8 years old and more confident, she shared a carefully prepared presentation about courage and asking for help. "Sometimes the scariest thing is telling someone you need them," she explained to the attentive children. "But that's also how you find out who your real friends are, and sometimes your real family." From the back of the auditorium, Richard watched with pride as Emma fielded questions with poise beyond her years. When asked directly about their unusual family formation, she answered with simple honesty, "I asked him to be my dad for just 1 day, but he decided to be my dad forever instead." The children accepted this explanation without the complications adults might impose. To them, the logic was sound and satisfying. After the presentation, Richard drove them home, where Martha awaited with her home health aide. Though still dependent on oxygen and limited in mobility, she had defied medical expectations by rallying enough to participate actively in their daily lives. The guest room on the townhouse's main floor had been converted for her use, allowing her to remain part of Emma's life while receiving necessary care. That evening, as they prepared for bed, Richard found Emma in her room examining the framed kindergarten graduation diploma that now held a place of honor on her bookshelf. "I was thinking," she said without preamble, "about how different everything would be if I hadn't asked you that day." Richard sat beside her on the edge of the bed. "I think about that too. How close we came to never knowing each other." Emma leaned against his shoulder, comfortable in the physical affection that had become natural between them. "Do you think it was just luck? Or do you think some things are supposed to happen?" It was the kind of philosophical question she often posed these days, her mind constantly exploring life's bigger patterns and meanings. Richard considered his answer carefully. "I think people create opportunities through courage," he finally said. "You were brave enough to ask for what you needed even though it was terrifying. That wasn't luck, that was strength." Emma nodded, apparently satisfied with this perspective. "Like how you were brave enough to come back after you said no the first time." "Exactly," Richard agreed, remembering that crucial moment of decision in his car, when he might so easily have driven away forever. Sometimes our best choices don't look practical or logical on paper, but they're still right. Later, after Emma had fallen asleep, Richard sat in his home office reviewing plans for Martha's house conversion project. On his desk lay two significant documents: the temporary guardianship papers from Judge Williams, now halfway through their term, and the preliminary adoption application Carol had prepared for when the time came. Beside these lay a photo album Emma had created, documenting their journey together. The first photo showed them at her graduation, their smiles revealing both the awkwardness and hope of that initial connection. Subsequent images captured milestones both significant and ordinary: court appearances and baseball games, hospital visits, and backyard barbecues. The most recent photo showed the three of them, Richard, Emma, and Martha, at Emma's 8th birthday celebration. Their expressions reflected not just happiness, but something deeper: the security of belonging that comes from chosen family rather than merely circumstantial connection. Richard closed the album gently, thinking about Emma's question regarding luck versus destiny. Perhaps the truth lay somewhere in between, in the countless small choices that led two strangers to become family, in the courage to reach across isolation toward connection, in the willingness to see possibilities where others saw only obstacles. Whatever forces had aligned to bring them together, Richard was certain of one thing. When Emma had asked, "Can you pretend to be my dad?" in that school parking lot, neither of them could have imagined how real that pretense would become, or how completely it would transform both their lives. As he turned out the lights and checked on Emma one last time before retiring, Richard remembered Martha's words from the hospital. "You kept your promise."